Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we are going to be playing Friends of the Forest, form swapping, Frostbite, Warcry Totem Druid. So the idea here is we are utilizing the node inside Warcry that allows it to turn itself into a totem. Now, the whole reason why we are even playing this is because a while back, I believe I heard one of the devs say that one of their favorite builds was utilizing Warcry as a totem. So of course you place it down, you make it apply a very large amount of frostbites thanks to of course the nodes in the upper left of Warcry, and that allows you to actually quote unquote clear. So my interest was piqued, so I wanted to try it. So that's actually why we're playing it this time around. But before we get into that, if you haven't already, I would heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you like content like this, as it helps out the channel and helps me know that this is what you want. Now, with all that being said, let's talk about the build in detail, shall we? So like I said, the idea is we're playing around Warcry Totem. Why is that? Well, if you were to play a normal Thorn Totem build, like the usual Thorn Totem, like Werebear kind of stuff, the biggest problem with it is it's clear. It has plenty of single target damage, but its clear is what I would call mediocre. That is because to make Thorn Totems and stuff do a very large amount of single target, you need to take a node that turns off all the extra projectiles, but gives it a very large amount of cast speed. And this allows you to, of course, do a very large single target with all of your Thorn Totems. But the problem is, since you're turning off all of the projectiles, you're not getting as much clear because your coverage is significantly less. Even if you grab the nodes that allow the projectiles to pierce, even with those, you still don't have that much clear. So to fix this problem, what I have found is you can actually utilize Warcry Totem. So this is very important, very complicated. So the way that this build works, the main rotation is we are in human form, and we turn into Werebear. When we turn into Werebear, it actually procs Roar. If you don't know, the transformation actually procs Roar, so you actually put down a totem then. Then your Warcry is off cooldown because you haven't used Warcry yet, which then you can use Warcry and then create another totem. So that's 2 Warcry totems. Then we Maul, which not only gives them a very large amount of percent damage thanks to this node. It also gives us entangling roots, which gives us access to, of course, the cast speed benefits from entangling roots for totems and vines, and it also shreds the enemy's resistances, which works really well with, of course, Warcry Totem. That combined with the 15 frostbites that it applies every attack, it means that we can actually clear monoliths with it. Now, of course, if you go to the dummy, it'll be like maybe 30k DPS. Now, that is very low if you think about it. But the thing is, most trash in the game have very low amounts of HP. Even at higher corruptions, their amount of HP is very low. And all we really need is a decent amount of damage being applied to the whole screen at once to kill all the trash. Because the thing is, the Thorn Totems, they're so strong, they can delete rares and stuff like that, right? They can handle that stuff. They just can't handle all of the little trash because, it takes forever to get through them all. But that's, like I said, what Warcry Totem does. Also, Warcry Totem pulls in enemies every time it casts, which then groups up enemies so that our Thorn Totems can pierce through them. So all in all, Warcry Totem is an integral part to making this build function. So we end up going through monoliths, we cast Warcry Totem twice, we maul, and then all of a sudden you can see all the enemies getting sucked into the Warcry Totem and eventually dying. Now, of course, I took this character and then leveled it from level 1 all the way to around 300-ish corruption. Normally I'd go a bit farther, but I am very stressed for time currently, and I need to start the next character, so we're gonna cut it off here. But essentially, if you're in Merchant's Guild, you could have much better gear than I currently have. If you were to look at my gear, a lot of the pieces are what I would say absolute trash, but I was rushing my pants off to try to, get the build finished. So I actually enjoyed this build a lot, mainly because it's kind of like a unicorn build. What do I mean by that? Well, not only does it utilize Warcry Totem, of all things, right? Because we all thought Warcry Totem just didn't do enough damage because, there's no damage modifiers in its tree. All you really have access to, of course, is the flat amount of frostbites. But it turns out plus 15 frostbites per cast is a decent amount. It is enough to clear trash. And of course, you can scale the cast speed. I have scaled the cast speed so much on my work rate totem that I believe it casts 6 times before leaving, which is about 2 times per second, which means, of course, we get 6 applications of that frostbite, and that's for 2 totems. That is enough to, kill the trash. Another problem that this build faces, like, it's a form swapping build. A form swapping build, I'll be honest, form swapping builds in general are very bad. That's what I mean by unicorn. Like, not many people play with form swapping. That's because it's usually very, very bad. But thankfully, thanks to the way that we're doing our build, we form swap so we get more access to more Warcry totems, right? And of course, we can swap to Spriggan form to summon even more minions, right? Like our vines and all that. So both of those combined leads us to having a pretty okay build. It's not like the best minion build ever, and of course minion builds always have problems and later corruption due to minion health scaling. I only have 400%. I should have double that by now so that, of course my minions don't instantly die to certain random boss attacks, but I didn't have the gearing for it. So one thing I would suggest if you're to play this build is to prioritize minion health scaling. Now, of course, I wouldn't suggest playing this build. It was a fun experiment, but it's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. Now, though, that being said, let's go in game and talk about the build more in detail, shall we? All right, so here we are in game with the character. So first things off, I just want to say there is a rotation to this build. There's a lot of button clicking. So the first rotation is you're going to actually cast Thorn Totem, right, down, get some free Thorn Totems, and then we're going to transform into Werebear form, put down 2 Warcry Totems, then of course Maul. Not only is that going to give our Warcry Totems more cast speed, it's going to give our Thorn Totems more cast speed, it's also going to shred enemies' resistances, and also give us a large amount of percent minion damage. Now the second part of the rotation is to turn into Spriggan form, put down 1 Thorn Totem, and then put down all your vines, and then put down your necks, which will kick you out of Spriggan form, so you don't have to wait for the cooldown, then go into Warcry, then, do all that, yada, yada, yada. Once you do both of these, that will be the main, rotation for the build, for the most part, right? So, let's talk about the skills of the character, shall we? So for Werebear form, it's very simple. All we really care about is getting access to area for Maul and Roar. We want the area for Roar so that our Warcry totems are bigger. Yes, this is applied to the Warcry totem area. We also get Maul cooldown, which allows us to spam Maul more for this massive 200% increased damage. This can stack, so if we keep mauling, we can actually stack this multiple times. Then of course we grab Woodland Bear for the Entangling Roots, so we can actually cast it. Then we also grab a Terra's Renewal, mainly because not only does it give us a cleanse, we also get haste, and we're constantly getting out of form. One nice thing about form swapping builds is we don't have to worry about rage whatsoever, mainly because we're constantly form swapping, so we don't actually have rage in general to deal with. Then next is going to be Warcry. Now, this Warcry, we have 26 levels. That is because we have double Apogee of the Frozen Light. This technically counts as a cold minion. So, of course, we can grab all the points here that I'm showing. We take 2 points travel into Staggering Roar, 1 point into Kinetic Scream, 3 points into Eviscerating Haul for those bleed stacks, which I'll explain why later, 1 point into Shallow Breath for the reduction in cooldown, which is great, then 1 point into Totemic Heart. This makes it so we make a totem instead of using a roar, which uses the Warcry instead of us, which is great because you'll see later. Then we take 4 points into Deep Roar. We have all these extra points, so we want as much area as possible so we can hit as much of the screen as possible. 1 point travel into Yorman's Wrath. This will turn it into cold and turn every single bleed stack into Frostbite. This also applies to bleed, like mini bleed chance as well, that you could apply to the Warcry totem, so you can actually get more stacks that way. We grab this note here, 5 points into Heart of Rhyme, which allows us to get an extra 10 Frostbite stacks. This on top of the all the other stuff that we have, this allows the Warcry totem to actually clear trash, which is great. And then we're also getting a massive 200% cold damage for our minions and our allies, then 1 point into Bringer of Winter for the free chill chance. This is very important because we deal more damage against chilled enemies, more cold damage against chilled enemies, so making sure that everything is chilled is very important. Then the last few points would take 1 point travel into Juggernaut, then 1 point to Breath of Aterra. One thing I would suggest is maybe taking a few points out of Deep Roar or Eviscerating Howl and putting it to Breath of Aterra so that we have a little bit more healing. I was starting to get to the edge of what I would call useful healing with the build, so maybe grab an extra point in this or two. Then 1 point into Apprehend so we could pull instead of knockback. This will actually group enemies up much easier and makes clearing much easier. Then for Thorn Totem, or stereotypical Thorn Totem setup, we're just using Pillars of Heorot to turn them into cold. We're grabbing as many as we can with a Forested Expanse, grabbing Grove Mine, so we summon them all at once, of course. Then we're grabbing Titan's Bane for that massive cast speed. We're getting the extra Pierce as well. The more damage here, global, 72% more damage. Then we're also grabbing the Frostbite duration here, which of course applies to all frostbites applied. Now you can see here, it turns all poison chance into frostbite. That's very important because we're utilizing a certain serpent's milk, which gives us a large amount of frostbite chance thanks to this amulet, which is great. And that's pretty much it for that. Then for our Spriggan form, it's very simple. Just grab all the totem stuff down here so we get extra totems, extra duration, more health, yada yada yada, extra totems. Then we're also grabbing the stuff to turn vines into range vines and returning them cold, which then they also benefit from the poison chance, the frostbite chance, and of course grabbing all the more damage and all the more damage here, right? That's pretty much it for Spriggan form. Now, let's talk about our passives that are important. So on our tree here, mainly we want it as much attunement as possible so that, of course, we get base health for our minions so they don't instantly die. Grab them all the HP as possible so we're tanky. Shaman here, this pen here is for our minions, which is great. Also, the attunement is great. We also grab this here, Ancestral Speed. This is Totem cast speed, so this applies to our Thorn Totems, and it also applies to our Warcry Totem. The more cast speed we get for our totems, the more casts that Warcry Totem can do within the 3 seconds of it living, which that's more frostbite stacks. Beastmaster, your usual Beastmaster tech stuff, but also as well the chase as well, so you get even more minion cast speed. Then for Druid here, we also grab a few things. Mainly, we need a little bit of minion healing. So we get 40% minion healing here. Eventually, it'd be 50%. We also get the healing totem. Also, the minion healing as well here. So that's 100% minion healing. So that'll apply to all of our minion healing. Our totems here from Spriggan form also heal us. So not only do our Warcry totem heals us, also our Spriggan totem Thorn Totems, like they heal us as well, which allows us to sustain in boss fights and stuff, and that's why you see my health going up and down constantly. Of course, grabbing the extra frostbite chance here is great. Getting the extra attack and cast speed for our totems is great. 8 points into piercing gale for the cold penetration, of course. We want as much cold penetration for our minions as possible so that, of course, we do more damage. And of course, we take 2 points into primal shifter. This is just 4 seconds of 50% armor, which, when we transform gives us more armor, which is great. That's always good. Now, one thing you could do if you want to be tankier, take the points out of Ancestral Speed or out of the Chase and push more points into the Druid and grab Hide Skin to be tankier, but like I felt tanky enough as it was. I do technically eventually want to move into those nodes if you're to push into higher corruption, but I didn't feel like I needed it at the time. And that's pretty much it for the passives. Let's talk about the gearing, also the blessings. So for the blessings, I went for armor, of course, crit avoid. Here you could go with lightning res, usually, probably. I just didn't want to grind it out because that would have taken forever. And of course, the void res is a black sun, so we don't have to run void res on our gear. Now for gearing, double apogees is something you want eventually. This +3 to minion skills allows us to have a 28 Thorn Totem. That, on top of that, it also applies to our Warcry Totem because it's a cold minion. We also get the minions deal 14% more damage against cold necrotic enemies. One thing about this build is we get a very large amount of percent damage for free thanks to this and thanks to Maul as well, which means that we want to find global more multipliers instead of percent. Now, eventually, if you were to get LP versions of these, I would go for cold penetration, then damage over time with minions. Those are the main ones you want. And of course, you get the 24% more damage from the buff from Apogee, which is great. Another thing that's important, this is like the first thing I would essentially try to Rune of Ascendance into this, is the Serpent's Milk, so you can get the 200% chance of poison on minion hit, which then gets converted into Frostbite for our Thorn Totems and our Spriggan Vines, which is great. Helmet here, probably that could be minion health instead of vitality, but summon Thorn Totem or cast Spear Totems and then health, good base. Chest here, this could be better if we had a little bit more HP on it, but like it's pretty close to what you want. Maybe minion health instead of that attunement. And for the rings here, pretty shitty rings, but we just want HP, res, minion health, minion damage, and attunement. Belt here, minion health, minion damage, cooldown recovery speed. We want a little bit of cooldown recovery speed, mainly because to bring Werebear form to a decent cooldown, so that of course we can, get out of form faster, because we want to get out of form as fast as possible. So shaving off 2 seconds off of that is great. Then here, of course, minion damage, minion health, res. Gloves here, attunement, minion damage, health, resistance, the usual. Probably be on better gloves, although the cooldown recovery speed is nice. Then, of course, boots here, movement speed, attunement, cooldown, HP. Then for a relic here, it's pretty simple. Minion health, minion damage, res, HP. And then for the idols, things we care about, minion healing effectiveness. This will make it so that the healing that they apply to us is better, which is great for us. Then, of course, cast speed for totems, making our Thorn Totems and our Warcry Totems casting faster. Minion bleed chance on hit. This will just give us a little bit of extra damage, and then the rest would be resistances and HP. Idols like this that give us crit avoid and HP are really good as well. And that's pretty much it for the character. That's pretty much it for the build. With all that being said, this has been Dread. I'll have to go do something else. Bye.